Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today on our webinar of Exploring Positive Masculinity and Challenging Misogyny. You may well be a teacher that is wanting some support with this in your school or within your classrooms. You may well be a PSHE lead or a member of SLT in school that is wanting to, gain some ideas as to how, ways that you can challenge this in a positive way. Or it might well be that you simply work with young people and are seeing this drip into your settings and are just wanting to raise your own awareness on this and find ways to tackle this. So if you do have any questions throughout, we are going to be having a Q&A right near the end of today's session. So if you do have any questions, please hold those till the end, and then if you could pop those in the chat, that would be really helpful. Okay, so my name is Bethan Hall. I work for Jigsaw Education Group and I am the 11 to 16 programme lead for their PSHE programme. I've been really involved in the writing and creation of this programme, so do have an awareness, really in-depth awareness as to how we work, challenge topics such as misogyny within our programmes. And also I've been a PSHE lead in schools, so I do understand the challenges and the obstacles at times, but also the great bits about the role too. So this is what we're going to be looking at. To begin with, we're going to be looking at why misogyny in schools demands that urgent attention, so looking at what the research tells us in this area. We'll then be trying to understand that problem, so understanding what might be the root causes, what does the research tell us in this particular area as well. Now, from September the 1st, schools that are teaching in England have to deliver the new 2025 RSHE guidance, and this covers topics such as misogyny, the manosphere, incel culture, and positive masculinity. So we're going to be looking at what does the guidance tell us, what does this mean for your school. We're then going to be looking at Jigsaw's approach. So we'll look at some lessons that explicitly look at these topics, but then we'll also look at the bigger picture. So we sometimes get questions at Jigsaw as to, what are you teaching at primary level on misogyny, for example? Well, we don't have lessons that are explicitly on misogyny in our primary content, but what we do, that doesn't mean to say that there aren't things that you're doing already, if you are a Jigsaw school, that actually are really supporting young people in this area. So even if you're not a Jigsaw school, this particular section is going to be really useful for you. There may well be some ideas that you might want to take away and embed within your own PSHE curriculums. Whole school strategies. So again, backed by teacher voice, we've spoken with lots of teachers and they've given us ideas and things that have worked well in their school in terms of those practical approaches as to how you can not just do this within your curriculum, but take it, outside of the classroom too. And then finally, Q&A and next steps. So if you do have questions, we will be addressing some of those or those at the end of today's webinar today. Okay, so YouGov did a study with over 1,000 teachers, so 1,018 teachers, and in October 2025, and this is what the research told them. So the first statistic, 45%, so almost half of teachers, and this was both primary and secondary teachers, described misogynistic attitudes and behaviours amongst boys at their school as being a problem. And then 9% said they saw it as a very big problem. Honing in specifically on secondary teachers, 67%, so amongst those teaching, 2/3 saw it as a problem, and 16% saw it as a very big problem. Additionally, still looking at secondary teachers, 39% of secondary teachers also said that they were aware of misogynistic comments being made towards female staff on at least a weekly basis. And 54%, so more than half, also say that the issue has become worse in recent years. So this is both primary and secondary schools we're talking here. But 60%, that statistic rose to 60% in secondary schools. Now we know that even since October 2025, there has been even further research done on this. So Teacher Tapp, for example, have done some further research, and the NASUWT did some research in April, speaking to teachers, but the themes remain similar. Essentially, teachers are highlighting this as a problem within their schools. So why is misogyny on the rise? Now, there are lots of reasons, and I don't want to oversimplify why misogyny is on the rise because there's a lot of very complex factors at play here. But we're going to initially look at 4 areas. And the reason why I've honed in on these 4 areas is because these are 4 areas that as a school you can address. And as a school you can consider how can we look at these areas within our curriculum and how can we look at this whole school as well. So to begin with, I'm looking at harmful content online. Now this is an area that I think a lot of teachers are aware of. So algorithms amplify misogynistic content at speed. A young person who watches one video is fed exponentially more. And TikTok research showed a 4 times increase in misogynistic content in just 5 days. Now, regarding this, as an adult, it's very difficult to understand or really empathise with a young person's experience being online. So, for example, the algorithms that we are fed as an adult will be very different to maybe what a young person is being fed. And even if you were trying to research or Google or find some of the video content or images or, influencers content that they're being fed, it would be quite hard to find simply because your own algorithms are already very bespoke to what they feel you're going to click on next. So, manosphere influencers. So initially, influencers present themselves as a lifestyle coach or a success mentor, and it may appear quite harmless initially. Now, what then happens is these more harmful messages are really interwoven within that content, which then makes it more palatable to vulnerable young men. Now, on the right here, low self-esteem and need to belong. Now, these are 2 areas that it's not new in terms of, working with teenagers and working with young people. If you think back to your own adolescent years, a time when you're trying to find your sense of identity, trying to find your sense of what group you might belong to, and you've got all of that combined with the developmental changes that are going on with you as well as a human. So 1/3 to half of adolescents struggle with low self-esteem. And then when boys feel uncertain, they can turn to misogynistic influences for simple answers to those complex feelings. So they're at a stage where they are particularly vulnerable in terms of impressionable as well. Now, a teenage adolescent brain is really hardwired to try and find that sense of belonging. You're at an age where you may be trying to step away from your family unit and find that sense of belonging elsewhere in other communities or other groups. And the manosphere communities exploit this. They offer that inclusion and that validation in exchange for adopting those harmful beliefs. So you can see how all these factors interwoven are really making this, an opportunity for this misogynistic content to really take grip and take hold. Now, I mentioned that I didn't want to oversimplify the reason. There are plenty of other reasons as to why misogyny is on the rise. So, for example, economic insecurities, the normalisation of incel culture, and cultural and political pushback are 3 other reasons. And I'm sure there are other reasons I haven't mentioned on this slide today as well. But I think essentially the message I want to give is there are areas that we can make an impact on here. But there are a lot of other factors, maybe more complex factors, also at play. Now I'm going to show you a video now, and this video is a 2019 Gillette advert, and normally the slogan for Gillette would be "the best a man can get," but they altered their slogan for this advert to be "the best men can be." The aim of the advert, or the message behind the advert, was for men to call each other out when they see behaviour that isn't acceptable or isn't positive masculinity, should we say. And actually, when the advert came out initially, it actually caused quite a backlash. There was almost an interpretation that this was an attack on men rather than men trying to better themselves and hold each other accountable. And it actually caused for Gillette a dip in sales, and also for some men to boycott the product itself, which is quite interesting. And the comments that were underneath the advert when it was on YouTube some of them were quite misogynistic in themselves. So it's interesting. We've got to get, I think the message here is it's a very sensitive area. And even within our content and the discussions we're having in classrooms, we really need to make boys feel that this isn't a them problem. This isn't an issue with boys themselves, and actually that we're really trying to encourage that positive masculinity. So and celebrate boys, because they're great. I've got 2 young boys myself, and oh my gosh, the qualities in men are fantastic as well. So it's really important that we're seeing this opportunity to celebrate men, but also to challenge maybe behaviours that aren't what we'd call positive masculinity.
Bullying.
The Me Too movement against sexual harassment.
Masculinity.
Is this the best a man can get? Is it? We can't hide from it.
Sexual harassment is taking over.
It's been going on far too long. We can't laugh it off.
What I actually think she's trying to say.
Making the same old excuses.
Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys.
But something finally changed.
Allegations regarding sexual assault and sexual harassment.
But she says
And there will be no going back. Because we believe in the best in men.
Men need to hold other men accountable.
Smile, sweetie.
Come on.
To say the right thing. To act the right way.
Not cool. Not cool.
Some already are. In ways big and small.
I am strong.
But some is not enough.
So how we treat each other, okay?
Because the boys watching today will be the men of tomorrow.
Okay, so in terms of what are schools seeing? Now, misogyny in schools, it isn't always loud. It isn't always very clear and attacking necessarily. It can surface quite quietly in schools. So it might well be an offhand comment that gets a laugh, the way a male student speaks to female staff in a way that they wouldn't dare speak to a male colleague, in the slang that's circulating on social media that teachers don't yet have a name for. And I know that last one in particular, when I've spoken with teachers, that is something that can be quite nervy for teachers. Sometimes students bring in slang that you don't know what it means, and you're not sure if it's a compliment, you're not sure if it is a safe word to bring in the classroom. And that's also, I think, hard to remain relevant and up to date on top of. And almost impossible to do so, because this slang is ever evolving as well. And then when these moments pass without challenge, or they're handled inconsistently, that messages become muddled, they then settle in the background in the culture of the school as well, and they start to feel normal. So this is how misogyny often presents itself in either the classroom or in the corridors. Of course, there are misogynistic comments that are quite more explicit at times, but this is more, I'd say, common in terms of what schools are seeing misogynistic behaviour-wise. Now, we did some research with our secondary schools in about January last year, and we interviewed lots of teachers on this particular topic of misogyny, and this is what some of the comments that some of our teachers made. So, and I'm not going to read them all out, but for example, Year 7 boys seeking approval from older students by adopting misogynistic views to fit in. And that links back to that comment or reason we mentioned before about that needing to belong as a teenager as well. The class is more divided on gender lines than ever. Boys talking about alpha males, girls saying all men are dangerous. And I think the RSHE guidance makes it really clear that we're not villainising boys with our curriculum as well, that we're making it very balanced. We're providing those opportunities, though, for boys and girls to talk in single-sex spaces as well, maybe on their thoughts and feelings on this, but ultimately that we're making sure that our curriculum is balanced and not attacking on a gender in particular. Now, in terms of how do we deal with this at school, it's no longer as simple as just setting a detention for a misogynistic comment. That isn't going to necessarily support that young person in reflecting on that comment. If anything, it can actually create a further divide. So what we really should be doing is interrupting a culture in which misogynistic behaviour feels unremarkable in the first place. And also this also runs parallel with parents. So we need to be making sure we're keeping our parents in the loop about our approach in school, and we're all pulling in the same direction here too. Okay, so what does the DfE RSHE 2025 guidance tell us about this particular area? So first of all, schools must directly address misogyny and challenge the harmful attitudes and behaviours associated with it. It can no longer be treated as a peripheral issue. And what we mean by that is that misogyny can no longer, some of these topics here can no longer be what's the word I'm looking for? Reactive. It needs to be proactively interwoven throughout your schemes. Online harm. Pupils must learn to critically evaluate online content, understand how algorithms work, and recognise the persuasive techniques used by harmful influencers. So that critical analysis skills, they are going to be really important for our young people, and making sure that our lessons and curriculum isn't just knowledge-based, but it's also allowing them to develop those skills and that awareness as well. Unhealthy relationships. The guidance explicitly requires teaching about the signs of unhealthy relationships, consent, and the impact of harmful sexual content and pornography. Positive masculinity. So schools should help students, especially boys, develop healthy, positive, healthy identities and understand that masculinity isn't just defined by dominance or the suppression of emotions. And safe spaces. Ofsted guidance recommends giving single-sex pupil groups the opportunity to speak freely about sexual harassment, online sexual abuse and sexual violence. So there is some very specific guidance here. Now regarding the pornography, the link also in the guidance is made quite clear about pornography and its link to misogynistic content and attitudes as well. So what does this mean for your school? So schools must now have a clear planned curriculum that addresses misogyny explicitly. So it can't just be reactive, it can't just be a one-off assembly, it needs to be really woven into your curriculum. Teach students to critically analyse online content and influencer tactics. Address incel culture, manosphere content and harmful masculinity norms. Provide age-appropriate content on healthy relationships and consent. And then create those safe spaces for honest conversations about gender and respect. And all of this needs to be really well mapped in your RSHE provision against the 2025 guidance. Now, Ofsted will look for that mapping against the 2025 guidance. They'll also look for what students' understanding of healthy versus unhealthy relationships is, how schools respond when misogynistic language or behaviour occurs, and pupil voice, especially in single-sex groups, on safety and respect. And finally, please do utilise today's webinar to enhance student staff's confidence in handling these sensitive topics, because that is also what Ofsted are going to be looking for. And we do have some activities that you may want to take away to do with your PSHE teams as well. So misogyny is no longer optional. And it's, the guidance really makes it very clear, it expects us to be woven into the planned progressive curriculum, not just addressed reactively when an incident or incidents occur. So these are some reflection questions I think it's really important for you to take away if you're a PSHE lead or SLT member today, or if you're a PSHE teacher that you want to maybe feedback to your teams. So First of all, how confident do you feel that your school's current RSHE curriculum addresses misogyny? Where are the gaps that you can already identify? And what is the biggest barrier you face when teaching these topics? So these are 3 key questions that I think between now and certainly before September you need to be having some time to look at, either as a team or a PSHE lead. And feel free in September to take these back to your teams. As you know, it's a good starter activity maybe to gauge your team's awareness and confidence in these areas as well. Now, when talking about having that what I'd call bigger picture and making sure that your scheme isn't just reactive and ticking a box essentially, it's important that we highlight the importance of looking at this from primary all the way through to secondary, because you know it's about the skills and the bigger building blocks that we need to be thinking about before they even start looking at this content more explicitly from the age of, in our scheme anyway, Key Stage 3. So initially in Key Stage 1, we highlighted right at the beginning of our webinar today some areas that our young people need support with and why misogyny might be on the rise, and low self-esteem and sense of belonging were 2 of the reasons I gave. You can look at this throughout Key Stage 1 all the way through to Key Stage 4 in an age and stage, and you know, building on each other, building on each lesson way. So we look at this even Key Stage 1, we look at that sense of belonging, we look at self-esteem in Key Stage 1. We also look at respect and difference, so we look at difference in terms of gender, fairness and identity. Now, emotional literacy is embedded throughout all of our schemes from primary through to secondary. And emotions and well-being, so naming and managing feelings, is really important when we're looking at, allowing our young, not just boys, but boys and girls, to really recognise the importance of naming and managing feelings. And then critical thinking, so questioning what we see. Because these are all skills that are going to really help them to counteract some of that really harmful content they might be seeing online when they move on to their teenage years. And these themes then really build on each other through Key Stage 2 in an age and stage appropriate way. And then Key Stage 3, you can see even here some of those themes are starting to build again in a more age and stage appropriate way, so that by the time we get to Key Stage 4 or Year 9, I think in our schemes anyway, some of that more explicit content on misogyny, on incel culture, on harmful content online, that they're in a position where they've actually already built the skills and were prior to looking at this in a more explicit way later. Now I'm going to deep dive now into 2 particular lessons within our scheme that look at this in a more specific and targeted way. So first of all, we have a lesson, this is a Year 9 lesson in our Changing Me unit, called Masculinity and Online Influence. Now, the learning intentions, we have a PSHE and a social and emotional learning intention for all of our lessons. And the PSHE learning intention is to identify messages about masculinity from media and online sources, recognise persuasive techniques used by online influencers, and social and emotional learning wise, to think critically about content encountered online. And our key activities in this lesson include, for our starter, we have a masculinity ranking exercise. Now, obviously, there is no right or wrong answer on this. It's really here as a starter activity to kind of stimulate discussion and raise that awareness of differences of opinion on masculinity as well. We then look at sources of masculinity. So we really ask students to critically think about 4 areas in particular, and where ideas in society may come from regarding what is masculinity. So we then look at influencer tactics. So we look a bit more specifically about tactics that influencers might use online, and how algorithms work as well. So these are some of the activities you can find within this lesson. There are other activities too, but these are some of the more key activities. So you can see this in practice here. This is one of our lessons which looks at a ranking exercise. Of course, There is no right or wrong answer here, but I think that's the whole point of this exercise, is to get students discussing, why they think that as well. We then have a section where we ask students to think about, sources of influence, and thinking about where those ideas about how men should be have come from. And all of these activities are all very discussion based. There's no judgment. The idea is that we're wanting young people to bring their thoughts and feelings and ideas to the surface here. And then we also have role models of positive masculinity interwoven throughout our scheme. It's really important we're seeing those role models throughout our curriculum, and also actively within our school community as well. Now, something we feel quite strongly about at Jigsaw is the importance of not framing boys as the problem, and for girls to also be part of these lessons, and making sure that because it's important that girls are very aware of maybe the potential pressures or expectations that our boys and young men might be feeling. Now, a lesson that follows in directly after this lesson in Year 9 is one that then starts to look at misogyny, incel culture, and healthy relationships. So the learning intentions here are to define misogyny and recognise it online, understand incel culture and why it is harmful, identify warning signs of unhealthy online content. And then our social and emotional learning intention here is, we know that incel culture is quite linked closely to rejection. So we look at this quite specifically as well as a theme. And as you can see here, looking at some of the activities below, we've got, for example, opportunities for students to analyse social media posts and develop those critical and analysis skills in this area, and critical thinking skills, to look at healthy versus unhealthy online communities, and also to audit their own behaviours online and their own communities online, and what is positively influencing them online as well. And we do have a specific case study as well that links to this too. So these are an example of some of the slides that are linked to this content. And as you can see here, we also, again, a really discussion-based lesson that is really, hopefully going to really engage your young people too. Now, we do like to make sure that we do know there's that real link with rejection and incel culture. So we also look at what healthy ways could you handle rejection as well. So what makes Jigsaw different? Now, initially, I think the biggest difference here is that whilst we do have explicit lessons on misogyny, there is a much bigger need here than just a few lessons on it. It's really important that we're building on concepts year on year, so from primary all the way through to secondary, so that by the age of 13, when you're looking at these explicit, in an explicit way, the foundations are already in place for you to engage with these complex topics like misogyny. So we do have a spiral curriculum, and that just makes sure that all the building blocks are in place for you already. Psychological safety first. So every lesson begins with the Jigsaw Charter. Students know they've got the right to pass. They know they've got a right to privacy, and there are obviously safeguarding elements that we do make clear here in terms of, if comments are made that do have a safeguarding element to them, we will pass that on to the DSL. And of course, we would want students to be discussing these conversations at home as well with parents should they wish to. And also, they have their right to their own opinion as well. And again, in terms of the right to their own opinion, we're going to look at, because there will be students that bring in misogynistic opinions on things into your classroom, we're going to look at how you can challenge those in a proactive way, in a positive way, later in today's session. We also encourage pupil voice, so we are relevant, responsive content that encourages active participation. We do this via videos, by discussion points, and also by questions as well. And boys aren't the problem. So our curriculum is carefully designed to engage boys and not position them or villainise them as the issue. Positive masculinity is celebrated and it's not just defined. Finally, ready to teach. So all of our materials are fully resourced, statutory mapped to reduce that teacher workload. We know it's tough job, a tough but rewarding job, and to build confidence when tackling topics that they may find challenging or uncomfortable. And evidence informed. So our materials have been developed by subject experts, mapped to the 2025 guidance, and we follow the recent research as well on topics such as misogyny, online harm, and adolescent wellbeing. Now I'm going to show you a video which is found within our schemes. We have hundreds of videos in our schemes. We have what we call a talking head video, which is what I'm going to show you in a moment, but also some expert-led videos. And these videos here are really embedded throughout our schemes to try and encourage, not replace, but encourage and stimulate conversation in the classroom.
Stereotypes are a generalized idea of certain, usually marginalized groups such as gender, race, or sexuality. They are sometimes quite demeaning. They're very broad and they're based off of usually false ideas. They are often used to make fun of and marginalize people of those groups.
Stereotypes happen because as people we want to be able to put other people into boxes so we think we can understand them. But that means we don't give those people, the opportunity to, tell you who they are.
Judging someone that you don't know based on how they look or how they act, and just assuming things about them that maybe aren't necessarily true.
If there's a stereotype about you, when you enter a conversation, someone's already decided what you are, who you are.
Yeah, and then a gender stereotype would be exactly that. It's making a judgment on someone or how they might act or who they might be only based on their gender without actually knowing them as a person, having an opinion just based on their gender.
Gender stereotypes are kind of made to hold specifically women down. They're made to limit them and tell them that they can't do certain things, which of course they can. It's just a very outdated traditional belief that is very harmful to women and to society as a whole.
I would say no. I don't think people are always conscious of it. I mean, we all have stereotypes that maybe we believe or that we feed into without even realizing. I think it's easy to have an opinion based on maybe something you've heard or something you've seen, and you can carry that without actually realizing.
Personally, I'd say it's more of a subconscious thing, like the assumption that women aren't as good at football as men and things like that, and the idea that women can't lead businesses.
Nurses being women, doctors being men.
Yeah, that's actually really true, because that's like a picture that I quite literally have in my head.
Yeah.
It's not just something that's said, it's just like ingrained. Naturally, I don't even remember where it came from.
We might not think them really, but we kind of assume them in our minds because that's what we've been socialized into believing. Subconsciously, we're just told these things by the media, by maybe even our parents, even if they didn't mean to. And we just perpetuate them throughout our lives without realizing.
A stereotype is essentially an assumption that we make about someone based on something that we know about them, so like a certain characteristic about that person. In this example, we're thinking about gender stereotypes, so assuming that we know things about people based on whether they're male or female or man or woman. Often these are wrong. There's no one thing that we know about someone because they're male or female, but society quite often has kind of trained people to think that boys are like this or girls are like that. So stereotypes can be really unhelpful when people are trying to find their own individualism and be comfortable with who they really are. Often people aren't aware that they're making these assumptions about people. They're so ingrained in society from a really young age. We get messages from the people around us about what a gender should be or shouldn't be like. So it's something to consider when we're thinking about ourselves and others.
Okay, so that's just an example here of some of the ways we try and engage conversation, and those kind of videos could be used as a starter, for example. So I know the last tutor group I taught was actually a Year 9 tutor group, and trying to engage in conversation was actually quite difficult because a lot of young people do struggle with that. Fear of saying something, having the judgment on what they've said, or just having that confidence to maybe contribute to class discussion. So these videos aren't there to replace that, but they are there as maybe a starting point as well. So based on insights from deputy head teachers and PSHE leads across England, we did some research in January and interviewed a lot of teachers on these strategies that they could utilise within their whole school. And these are 4 main areas that we were able to identify there. So initially, challenge online influencers, build self-worth, and these are in no particular order here, provide positive role models, and build a culture of respect. And I'm going to start to delve a bit deeper into each of these 4 areas now. Okay, so with regards to challenging online influence, it's important that when misogynistic comments are brought into your classroom, or that you hear them in the corridors, that you're not just dismissing or shutting down those misogynistic comments. So simply by giving it attention and not opening that up, using it as an opportunity to open up that conversation with that student, that's not going to necessarily support that child. If anything, it's just going to create a further divide between you as an adult and that child, and could actually do the opposite. It can actually make the young person feel more strongly about their right to their opinion as well. And also making sure that you're following up in a safe space. Now, I'm going to be opening this up in a bit more detail in terms of practical ways to do this later in our webinar today. Train staff within your school in how to manage these conversations, and you could utilise the activity we're going to do in a few slides' time to do that. Invite parents to understand what their children are consuming online, so raise their awareness as well. And then use PSHE sessions proactively, not just reactively, which I've already made very clear in my previous content today. Build self-worth, so embed emotional regulation and self-esteem throughout PSHE, and jigsaw schemes do this really, really well. Give students positions of responsibility to show them they belong and they matter. Find opportunities within your school for students to find their sense of belonging in your school community. Use student voice to shape the curriculum and ensure disengaged students have visible agency in school life. Okay, so provide positive role models. Now, I've shown you ways we could do this within our curriculum or within lesson content, but it's also important we're doing this actively by using male staff to model positive masculinity day to day. You can use career sessions, for example, to show men and women succeeding together. And our Dreams and Goals unit, where we've got some examples of career education, there's some great opportunities there where you could, adapt a lesson in order to show examples of this. Set up peer mentoring schemes involving a wide range of students. So that's not just involving those high achieving students academically, but also think about students within your school that would really benefit from this too. Celebrate qualities like kindness, courage and compassion, and not just achievement too. Now, the last one, build a culture of respect. I think this is probably one of the hardest areas, actually. So initially, address disrespectful language consistently across the whole school. And make sure you're making your staff aware as to how you're doing that, so that the consistency is there amongst all school staff. Use real examples from TV and media to open discussions about healthy relationships. And again, our jigsaw schemes do this. Teach students the challenges that both genders face, not just their own. So I showed an example slide previously about ensuring that, the girls are being empathetic and understanding as to the challenges that boys may face, and vice versa. When you're discussing maybe some female challenges as well. Embed character education. So not, just be kind shouldn't be just taught in a lesson. It should be modelled as a daily message. Now, leading back to our research that we did previously in the year, this is some comments that some of the teachers made. So, for example, if our staff hear something misogynistic, they don't chastise or set detentions. Instead, they make it clear that the comment is unacceptable. And then they pick up the conversation with the student later on. Now, there are two, this needs to be put into context a little bit, because I think it depends on the context we're talking here. But in terms of picking up the conversation with the student later on, we're going to look at what you might, approach you might want to take if you want to have that conversation there and then on the spot. But also, rather than just maybe saying that is unacceptable, thinking about how you can frame this in a way that's going to really allow that young person to reflect on their comment as well, rather than just saying that is not okay. Without trying to frighten parents, we show them statistical evidence that by the age of 13, most children will have seen pornography and misogyny on their phones. And then parents are really supportive when they understand what we're doing. So make it allow parents to understand why you're covering this content and the importance of it as well. And then finally, a teacher's mentioned that our staff members help students understand there are many different types of positive masculinity by actively rejecting misogynistic notions and insisting on kindness as a number one priority in school. Now, we're going to look at a scenario here. So a year 9 boy is stating that, why are we even talking about this stuff? My dad says this whole respect women thing is just because men aren't allowed to be men anymore. So this is an activity you could do within your, CPD at school, within your own teams as well. So for example, the first question would be, how would you respond in the moment? And would you respond in the moment? How would you follow up the student later? And then how does your current RSHE provision address the underlying belief? Now, there are lots of factors to bear in mind here. So I think the one that strikes me initially is the my dad, the family influence here, and how sensitive that can be as well. We also have to address that, boys may well be feeling this way when we're talking about this. They may feel that, that there's a lot in the media, and there's a lot of conversation surrounding these topics at the minute, and they may feel this way. So, address that. Don't shut that conversation down necessarily. And there's a framework that we could utilise to do so, and I'll show you this now. So first of all, discussion. So what would you do? So notice it and name what you're hearing. So state something that's maybe true relating to what that young person has said. And I'm going to model an example response to you regarding this particular quote in a minute using this framework. Stay curious, so ask, don't tell. So as I mentioned before, rather than just saying, sorry, that's misogynistic, that's not okay, you've got a detention, that's just going to totally shut down the conversation. And if anything, particularly if that boy's got a really close relationship with his father and really respects his father, that's not going to necessarily allow that young person to reframe and reflect upon their comment and the impact of that comment as well. Open up discussion, so bring in other voices and viewpoints as well. And then, regarding yourselves, think about the bigger picture. So think about, are there areas that we need to be supporting our young people with surrounding that particular comment as well? And this is what it could look like. So in terms of the notice it and name what you're hearing, you could say something like, it sounds like this feels a bit pointless to you. And as I said, that's making sure that you're hearing that young person. And I get that. A lot of people feel these conversations are aimed at putting men down. So I think it's important that you state something that's maybe true as well, relating to what that boy has said. I'm assuming, it was boy at the beginning, yeah. So stay curious, ask, don't tell. So what do you think being a man actually means? Do you think respecting someone gets in the way of that? So, and again, we're not looking for, as a teacher, to put thoughts into those our boys' minds. We're asking them to genuinely reflect upon what they're necessarily saying. Open it up, bring in other voices and viewpoints. So are there men in your life you really look up to, and how do they treat people? Who benefits when men and women actually get along well? So look outside of maybe your discussion and bring in other viewpoints too. Think about the bigger picture. So as a teacher, you then need to be recognising that home influences are real, build a school culture where respect is framed as strength and not as constraint. So this is an example about how you could model this. And what you could do in your school teams, if you've got an opportunity for some inset in September or between now and September, is you could actually create your own quotes on misogynistic comments that could be brought into the classroom, and use it as an opportunity for teachers to discuss how they might respond using this framework. So they're not going into the classroom, feeling when they have comments like that on the spot that they've got nothing necessarily to fall back on. They're going in feeling a little bit more equipped for these conversations and a bit more empowered also to open up these conversations too. Now, after the moment, it's important that you do then follow up privately with the student who made the comment again. So this can be often more effective than publicly correcting or reframing. And it's also important to highlight that these conversations can go in several directions. So, and we don't want it to appear that this is a personal, I suppose, target at that particular young person. We want them to understand that we have their best interests at heart as well, which we do, essentially. So check in with students who may have felt targeted or uncomfortable, and don't assume that silence means that they're fine. And then finally, I've mentioned this before, but also reflect on whether that comment revealed a gap in your curriculum that might be worth addressing directly. Now, regarding protecting your own energy, it's very easy for me to sit on this side of the webinar and state what you should be doing and how you should be doing it. But in the moment, particularly if you're, have a comment that's caught you totally off guard, or it might well be that your lesson is actually, you've got a real time limit on how much you can and how much time you can provide for these conversations because of what you need to achieve in your lesson itself. It is important that you also protect your own energy. You might, want to consider whether you resolve it immediately. And you don't have to resolve it completely immediately. It's a perfectly legitimate and response to be able to say, I want to think a bit more carefully before responding to a student. That is a totally legitimate and modelling response as well. Have a few go-to phrases ready to reduce your cognitive load when it happens unexpectedly as well. Now, we do on our website have a knowledge hub, and in here you can see a lot of our recorded webinars and a lot of our upcoming webinars as well. But we also have some articles and magazines as well. And we have one particular article called How to Tackle Misogyny in Secondary Schools that you might find quite useful. And it does pick up on some of the points that I've made today during my webinar. Now, key takeaways. So, misogyny education is now statutory in secondary schools. So the 2025 RSHE guidance makes it very clear that schools have to directly address misogyny, incel culture, harmful online content and positive masculinity. So it's no longer okay to just deliver this reactively. It needs to be part of a planned curriculum. Boys aren't the problem. So effective teaching approaches this topic without positioning boys as the villains. And jigsaw lessons celebrate positive masculinity and give boys the tools to make positive choices. Teaching students to think critically about social media. So digital literacy is just as vital as relationship education. So giving them the skills that they need in this particular area. It starts from Key Stage 1 all the way through to Key Stage 2 or 3 and 4. Helping students understand how algorithms, persuasive tactics and echo chambers work equips them with the critical thinking skills they need to navigate the online world confidently. And then finally, a whole school approach is most effective. So whilst talking about this explicitly in lessons in an age and stage appropriate way is important, it's also important when looking at our whole school culture too. So reframing and addressing harmful comments, a safe whole school culture, parent engagement, positive role models and strong curriculum all work together. And just having 1 or 2 lessons on this is simply just not enough to be able to tackle these particular topics. Okay, so that is our webinar today. If you have any questions, please can you pop those now in the chat and I will address some of those now. Okay, so it looks like we haven't got any comments from our, we do have one, and one which came in previously actually, which was in terms of influencers such as Bonnie Blue. So we're talking about female influencers here. How do we address this within our curriculum? So whilst you will notice that throughout our schemes and all of our lessons, we never actually look at a specific influencer or mention a specific influencer. And this is done on purpose. Whilst we know that students may well bring these names into the classroom, we certainly don't want to be introducing or almost signposting young people, because you may well have a young person that has never heard of these influencers and they go off and Google them, and that's certainly what we're not wanting to achieve here. So we don't necessarily signpost specific influencers, but we do recognise young people may well bring those names into the classroom. Instead, what we do is we build those skills. So, a lot of the lessons we've looked at today and themes we've looked at when you look at the bigger picture, all of those skills and all those themes, they actually allow a young person to critically analyse and critically think about the content, what there's in front of them, whether it's a healthy community or not, and whether it's really helping build them as a person or not in a positive way. And all of this links to any unharmful content or any influential content that might be not helpful for a young person. So we don't explicitly talk about topics such as Bonnie Blue, but what we do talk about here is online influence in general. Okay, so thank you for your questions today. If you do have any further questions, please do get in touch with us at Jigsaw. It may well be myself that you get put in contact with when you contact school support or school support. We've got a fantastic team in our school support team who can answer any questions you might have regarding Jigsaw PSHE. So at 11 to 16 or 3 to 11. If you do have any questions regarding today's webinar, please do get in touch. We do work with teachers and we do provide CPD opportunities within schools as well. So again, please do take a look at some of the online free content that we have, but also get in touch if you're wanting something a bit more bespoke specifically for your school. Thank you very much.